Peter Wanday is the chairman of the Alfa Romeo Owners Club. Peter, good morning.
Good morning, Eric.
It's a very good morning and good to have you on the show. Welcome to Kenya's biggest conversation, the hot seat of the Situation Room.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here.
First of all, I like the way you spell your name. Wanday with a Y without a Y, without an I. So looked at it earlier and I was like, Peter Wanday.
Yeah, it's not siku moja.
It's not siku moja.
It is Wanday.
It is Wanday.
Yes.
Peter Wanday.
Yes.
The Alfa Romeo Owners Club. Tell us about this club.
Well, the Alfa Romeo Owners Club is a motoring club that was founded back in 1970. So it's one of the oldest motoring clubs in this country. I think probably only second oldest to the East African Motorsports Club.
Mm-hmm.
And it is basically a grouping of Alfa Romeo enthusiasts. If you know the Alfa Romeo brand, it's an Italian brand. It is a brand that is slightly over 110 years old now. Made its mark on the racing circuits of Europe in the 1930s. And Alfa Romeo is quite an understated brand in the sense that you don't see too many Alfa Romeos like you see other European models like Volkswagen, Mercedes, Audi, BMW. But Alfa Romeo actually pioneered the culture of motoring clubs way back. And I think Alfa Romeo has the biggest number of motor owners clubs around the world. So in this part of the world, actually until fairly recently, a couple of years ago, the only owners club that you could talk about was the Alfa Romeo Owners Club. So the club is 52 years old now, having been founded in 1970. The first meeting was held at the terrace of the Norfolk Hotel. Yeah, so that's a brief history of the club.
So basically, the owners of the Alfa Romeo car are, how would you describe them? In terms of their personality, their character.
The owners of Alfa Romeo cars are usually people who are very passionate about their cars and passionate about motoring in general. Sporty, they've got a sporty character, sporty in the sense of motorsports. You know, Jeremy Clarkson famously remarked that you are never a petrol head until you've driven an Alfa Romeo. So I think that sums up the personality of Alfa Romeo owners. These are real petrol heads.
Are they still making these cars?
Oh yes, they are. We've got some very interesting models right now in the market. I think the best known model now is the Alfa Romeo Giulia, which went into production from around 2007. It has won European Car of the Year award several times, and it's given the BMW 3 Series and the Mercedes C-Class and the Audi A4 run for their money. Those are some of the cars in its class that it competes with. And then Alfa Romeo is also producing SUVs now. You've got the Stelvio, which is doing very well in Europe. Unfortunately, we don't have a dealer in Kenya, so you don't see these cars on Kenyan roads. But they're doing very well in other countries.
So why don't we have dealership in Kenya? I mean, like you said, the oldest, or one of the oldest motor clubs in the country. It has consistently had presence in the country in terms of the owners of the car. Why not a dealership, even just owned by the owners club?
Well, first of all, the owners club would not run a dealership. We're not a commercial entity. We're just a fan club. But when it comes to running a dealership, really it's a commercial thing. And most people who are in the motor industry who would want to run a dealership look at the numbers and the return on investment. It's not a very cheap affair to operate a dealership. You've got to guarantee the brand that you are marketing of a certain volume. Now, Alfa Romeo does not produce very many cars. Just to give you some statistics, for example, before they produced the Giulia in 2007, Alfa Romeo was producing hardly 75,000 cars a year. If you compare that with, let's say, Toyota, one single model of a Toyota produces hundreds of thousands in a year. So, but that was scaled up after the production of the Giulia and the Stelvio and the Tonale, which are some of the latest models now. Production has been scaled up to about 500,000 cars in a year. It's still not a very big number. So some of the dealerships, some of the business people who want to run dealerships, look at this market and ask themselves, how many cars are they able to sell in a year? But having said that, we came very close to getting a dealership in this country around 2018, 2017, 2018. I will not name some of the existing dealers in the market who wanted to take up the brand, but there were concerted efforts by some of the existing dealers to take up the brand. But as you know, the motoring industry lately has seen a lot of games of musical chairs. So things turned around, and by the end of 2019, interests were changing, and new players were coming in who wanted to take the brand. And then COVID happened. And as they say, it disrupted our lives, and we're just coming out of it. So I'm still hopeful that we will get a dealer soon.
Sure. Is it? Would you describe it as a niche product, as almost one that would teeter on the edge of luxury?
I wouldn't really call it a niche product. Alfa Romeo, a niche brand. Some people like to say that Alfa Romeo is a poor man's Ferrari. Because both Ferrari and Alfa Romeo came from the same stable, highly trained engineers, but it doesn't cost you what you'd pay for a Ferrari. In fact, Alfa Romeos are cheaper than BMWs and Mercedes, so it's not really a niche brand. It's not a luxurious brand. It is just it's an average brand, I would say. Yeah.
So, I mean, obviously looking at how this has come, then why or what is it then about luxury, vintage, classic vehicles, before we even go as to why Concours was established, what is it about vintage, classic, luxury vehicles then that appeals to the mind of people that you want to then bring it out, shine it up, tune it up for that day when people can come and look and see what cars of then days used to do and what they can do today?
Well, I want to take the word luxury from out of that statement. The thing is, classic and vintage car collection is a passion, just like you've got some people collecting art, pieces of art and all that, you know. And, you know, cars are artistic objects, you know. I mean, over the years, cars have been produced that look and appeal to different minds in different ways. And what we try to do basically is to kind of, you know, in a way we are trying to offer an opportunity for people to look back and see these are the models of cars that have formed the history of the automobile. So it's kind of like nurturing this automobile history. Yeah.
So when the first Concours started 50 years ago, was it only for Alfa Romeo cars, or did it have other models of cars as well?
Yes, it was actually a purely Alfa Romeo affair, and that was in 1971. And the first Concours d'Elegance was held in celebration of the first anniversary of the establishment of the Alfa Romeo Owners Club. I mean, when the club turned 1 year old, the members sat down and asked themselves, what can we do to celebrate this milestone? And an idea came that why not host a beauty pageant of cars, the Concours d'Elegance. So it was open only to Alfa Romeo cars. And the members then thought, well, we'll be lucky if we get 10 Alfa Romeos on parade. And surprise, surprise, there were upwards of 15. And they thought, well...
All from within the country?
Oh, yes, all from within the country. Actually...
And at that time, they were looking at they were still looking at the old vehicles. Nobody brought...
No, not really.
A recent model to that Concours.
What actually happened the first Concours? Let me take you back a little bit to the history of the Alfa Romeo Owners Club. There's a gentleman who set up a dealership of Alfa Romeos back in the late 60s. And when he sold his 100th Alfa Romeo. He thought, let me celebrate these customers of mine.
Right.
So he invited them to the terrace of the Norfolk, and that celebration conceived the idea of forming an Alfa Romeo Owners Club. So the first Concours d'Elegance was actually open to Alfa Romeos, and most of them were not that old. They're cars which had been sold in the preceding couple of years.
You're right.
So they were really not old machines.
So looking at this affair, I mean, it's when we, of course, vintage, people have tuned up the vehicles that they have before. People want to be able to come and showcase. So beyond the showcase, what is it really that people can then come in and say, well, I mean, have a look at this? Or is it to look at what is available, what used to be, what people used to drive then? So it's like going into an art gallery and looking at the pieces on exhibit. This is art in itself, with these vehicles, classic or vintage, with these vehicles coming out and seeing then, you know, what's available. So would you describe it as a day of walking through a giant vehicle exhibition per se?
Yes, I think you've described it quite aptly. It's almost like walking into a big motor museum and seeing cars from a bygone era. But beyond the cars that and motorcycles as well, because remember the Concours d'Elegance is not just about vintage and classic cars. We also have motorcycles on parade, and but beyond these vintage and classic cars, we also have other attractions, including new models, because we have the auto trade, what we call the Auto Expo section of the Concours. Yeah.
When you look at the growth of the Concours for the last 50 years, since now that first one in 1971, it was purely Alfa Romeo cars and Alfa Romeo owners just coming to spend an afternoon together. At what point did it start now opening up to, okay, other models? If you've got a classic car, vintage car, just come and bring your car and let's see the vehicle.
Yeah, so the first 10 years were exclusive to Alfa Romeo cars alone. But after those 10 years, with the growth of the event, an idea came that why don't we open this up to other makes and models of cars. So from the 11th year, other makes and models were allowed. And several years later, motorcycles were also allowed. So this has seen, this led to the growth of the event. And every year, really, it's scaling up. The first event was held somewhere along Thika Road at what was then the Spread Eagle Hotel, the location of the present-day Safari Park Hotel. And the event was held there a couple of years, and then it moved to Embakasi Racing Circuit, just off Mombasa Road, which is roughly where you now have the Inland Container Depot. And the event continued being staged there for quite a number of years until I think 1987, when the ownership of the land around there changed. The government changed the usage of the land, so the motor racing circuit kind of was edged out to give way to industrial developments. So that is when the event moved to the Nairobi Racecourse, where it's been held since. And at the Embakasi Racing Circuit, the spectatorship numbers were roughly in the tune of 2,000 people, 2,000 spectators. So when the event moved to the racecourse, the organizers had planned for roughly about the same number of spectators. But lo and behold, roughly 4,000 spectators turned up.
Wow.
Since then, the numbers have increased, and we get spectator numbers of an average of 10,000 in recent
Every
years.
year.
Every year.
And this is just for a single day.
This is just a single day.
People coming to see this.
Definitely.
In those initial days, even growing, what was the motivation? Well, besides the Alfa Romeo owners coming together and spending an afternoon together, I'm sure just socializing, was there any commercial interest? Did any develop, like, or even other causes, for example, saying, on this year, during the Concours d'Elegance, we are supporting a certain cause, or we want to discuss how we can support? Did you branch off into those kind of things?
Well, the Concours has never been about any commercial. It's never leaned towards any commercial undertaking. Everything that happens there basically is just to give Kenyans and the world at large an opportunity to serve the offerings on that one day, which is basically seeing these beautiful vintage and classic cars. But then we also have other attractions like we have a kids entertainment area because it's a big family day out. So we don't like to say that this is like a game of rugby where only adults really, so to speak, are allowed in. We try to encourage Kenyans, people to come out with their families. So there's a kids entertainment area, which is a separate attraction. We have, as I mentioned earlier, we have the Auto Expo section, which is an exposition of new models of cars in the market, as well as motoring products. So you've got people who deal in tires, people who deal in, say, batteries or car cleaning products, who also come out to exhibit their products. And then we've got a section called the Heritage Collection, which we started some 5 or 6 years back. And in the Heritage Collection, we give exhibitors an opportunity to showcase old pieces of equipment that have formed the history of this country. So, for example, one of the popular attractions there over the recent years, has been a 1919 steam engine, which still works and steams away on the day. We've got a very old Mercedes truck owned by DT Dobby. I think it's a 1952 model, which was the first truck owned by DT Dobby, and it used to shuttle between Mombasa and Nairobi, transporting spare parts from the port to their showroom in Nairobi, etc. And the truck still works, looks in very neat condition. So it's one of the exhibits you find there. We've got old pieces of, say, tractors from back in the day. In fact, a few years ago, we had a Porsche tractor. Who knew that Porsche made
Porsche
tractors?
tractor.
Absolutely. Who knew that Porsche made tractors at one stage in the history? You know?
Wow.
Yeah. So the Heritage Collection is about such bits and pieces of equipment, historical equipment. And then we've got a section for motor clubs because we realize that we are no longer the only motor club in this country. There are many motor clubs. So we give other motor clubs also an opportunity to come in and pitch and show Kenyans what their clubs are all about.
And the recruit members as well.
Then we have a section called the Classic Cell, where we allow anybody who's got any classic car that they would want to sell. It's like an auto bazaar, so to speak. So they can come and park it there and offer it to the public. And it doesn't have to be a moving car. It can be a junk brought in the back of a truck or a flatbed and parked there. And in fact, the classic sales section has been a good source of project cars for classic car enthusiasts who purchase cars there and take them through a restoration process. And a few years later, the cars come back there.
To the Concours, looking all different.
Looking all different.
What qualifies as a classic or vintage car?
A classic car, okay, let me start with a vintage car. A vintage car is defined as one that was built between 1919, 1st January of 1919, up to 31st December 1930. Then from 1st January 1931, you've got what we refer to as a post-vintage era. And that goes until roughly the start of World War II in 1939. I think September 1939. And during the Second World War, most vehicle production companies basically stopped manufacturing cars because of the war.
Yeah.
So most production of cars then resumed again after the war, after 1945. So from that era, we then classify cars as classic. But a classic car, universally, the universal accepted definition is also one that must be at least 25 years old. It varies from here to there. I think in America they try to say at least 30 years old, but in the rest of the world we talk of 25 years. So for instance, in our Concours d'Elegance, the criteria for entering a car to the event is that it must be at least 25 years old.
So 1997.
1997, this year 1997. Yeah, but that only applies to cars. For motorcycles, we're a bit lenient because we don't have very many classic motorcycles in this country. So for motorbikes, we accept up to, from 5 years old and above.
All right. Let's take a break, then we continue the conversation. 29 now, coming up to 8:30. This is the Situation Room, Kenya's biggest conversation, live on SpiceFM, on KTN Home and online. Our guest this morning is a man who understands vintage and classic vehicles. Peter Wanday is a chairman of the Alfa Romeo Owners Club. We are talking about the 50th edition of the Africa Concours d'Elegance that's taking place this weekend, the 25th of September, Sunday, at the racecourse. Dress up for the event. We are all talking about, dressing up and all, and preparing and coming for the event to see the vintage and the classic cars and motorbikes, and also have fun just going around looking at these old vehicles, going around and interacting and chilling and taking the kids, let them play, let them enjoy, let them know that old is gold. and spouses as well, so they don't throw things out.
Spouses are old and gold. Okay.
Yeah. I will say no more.
Okay, sorry.
I will say no more. So that's the conversation we're having.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
Conversation continues with Peter Wanday, chairman of the Alfa Romeo Owners Club. The 50th edition of the Africa Concours d'Elegance taking place this Sunday, the 25th of September, at the racecourse, and we want everybody to go there. Peter, describe to us a typical vintage and classic car enthusiast or collector. What is it about this person who has a 1919 engine parked somewhere in their yard?
Well, Eric, they say that you got to have some passion in life that you do outside your daily
life
work and daily work chores, too much work but no play makes Jack a dull boy. So you've got people who just take an interest in collecting cars. And the whole thing actually about vintage and classic car enthusiasm is, I would say it's twofold. So you've got on the one hand that enthusiast who's interested in just collection. He's got no mechanical skills. He's got nothing to do with the restoration of cars. He would rather buy a ready product, a ready vintage and classic car, or buy a shell and give it to somebody to fix it up and deliver back to him as a sparkling, newish looking classic or vintage.
Yeah.
Then on the other hand, you've got the collector who is also a restorer. So these are guys who take time to tinker with the cars and fix it up themselves. You'd be surprised that most of the vintage and classic car restorers in this town actually work from their houses. They actually fix these cars themselves, maybe with a small team of mechanics to help them, but they work from their houses. So it's the same way like having a paint collector and a painter, an artist basically. So one is an artist, the other one is a collector. And then you've got a mixture of these. You've got those who are restorers and collectors as well, who are actually the majority. Yeah.
We don't then talk about this being a project. This passion. So let's say you've bought a shell and you want to restore this vehicle. Typically, how long does it take? And what does it entail? What is restoring a vehicle?
Restoring a vehicle can take anything from 6 months to 5 years or even more. There are some cars which have been under restoration for even 10 years.
Wow.
That's a bit extreme. But on average, you're looking at between 1 year to 3 years. And you see, most of these cars are rust buckets. By the time the owners find them, they're really rust buckets. So the process of restoration, basically, you strip down this machine to bare metal, basically bare frame, take out all the components and put them aside. And you're left with a bare frame. And you start from there. Usually such a frame would be rusty because of the vagaries of weather over the years.
Yep.
So you start with preparing the shell, anti-rust treatment and perhaps patching up rusty quarters and that kind of a thing, Then you start now the rebuilding process. Once your shell is intact, you start the rebuilding process. You look at the various components from suspension and steering to engine and gearbox. More often than not, you go to tear apart the engine and the transmission and overhaul them, because maybe this is a car that has not moved for even 20, 30, 50, 60 years, So you go to get all the parts, tear it apart, do an overhaul, rebuild the engine, rebuild the transmission, rebuild the suspension, nice paint work on the body. And then there's the interior as well. In most of these cars, the interior is all gone. The upholstery is not anything to write home about.
Yeah.
So you got to get a good upholsterer to reupholster the interior.
And it's got to look like it used to look in its years.
Yes, a good restoration is about restoring a car to its period correct status or condition. You've got some restorers who do a little bit of modifications here and there in terms of the looks, but a good restoration is about one that tries to look as close as possible to the original car when it left the factory. And in fact, some of these cars, I wish you come to the race course on Sunday, some of these cars look actually better than when they left the showroom in terms of the attention they've been given.
Yeah. But I'd also assume that it costs quite a penny. Because when you're talking about, let's say, just the engine and the suspension and all, you've got to get the spare part for a vehicle that's no longer in production. That means that you have to shop around the world for somebody who's got the suspensions for this particular model.
Yeah, that's true, but I wouldn't want to say that it is really that it breaks your bank completely. First of all, it's a hobby like any other, and all hobbies and interests come at a cost. If you're a golfer, I don't know whether you play golf. I see my friends who play golf. I don't, because I prefer to tinker with metal rather than hit a ball with a club and a green field. But if you're a golfer, you'd probably be always buying golfing equipment and wear and flying from one town to the other to indulge in your passion of in your golfing passion. It comes at a cost. So some of the friends I know even fly internationally to go and play around the golf or enter a tournament internationally. So everything comes at a cost. If you are a motorsport enthusiast who's racing and all that, a race car doesn't come cheap. So everything comes at a cost. But the good thing about car restoration is that you do it slowly. As I mentioned, most restorations are done over a long period of time. It could be 2-3 years. So you do it at your own pace. You're not under any pressure that this car must be ready next month or next year. You work at your own pace. You get a little bit of money and you buy the parts and move one step ahead, and that until you complete it. There are, in the Western world, there are a lot of. The classic car culture is much bigger than here, so you get a lot of spare parts out there in Europe, in the United States. There are people who actually produce aftermarket parts for a lot of these old models, which are no longer in production.
It's interesting that you said that, because one would think that an event like the Concours d'Elegance, you come out on Sunday and that you've just, pulled out your vehicle from, under the wraps on Friday, but that this is a hobby, that it's a habitual thing that you're doing, and then everybody then comes together on this day, but it's something that you've been doing in continuance. Is it also an escape? I'm an enthusiast of getting away from, the things that would eat you up. So would you look at it as that social, an opportunity for you to do something different from the stresses of the day? And I'm not just talking about Sunday, but the habit of, refurbishing,
Tinkering with metal,
tinkering
like
with
you
metal.
said.
No, you're quite right. I mean, actually, as a matter of fact, quite a number of classic car restorers or classic car enthusiasts in this town are retirees. You'll be surprised. So these are guys who need to find something to do in their free time now that they've stopped their daily routine of 8 to 5 job. So I mean, I could straight away think of quite a number of my colleagues who wake up in the morning and work on classic cars until evening, and they do that 5 days or 6 days a week. That's what keeps them going. Then you've got the other enthusiasts who are still in their productive stages of their lives, and they've got their 8 to 5 jobs, me included. But then here comes the weekend, and what do you do with your weekend? So you basically set up a routine. Maybe on Saturday and Sunday, or maybe Friday and Saturday, you're basically going flat out to work on your machine. So it's something, gives you an opportunity to get out of that boredom, or you
Just
get
that
something.
routine.
That routine,
It's
yeah.
an escape, like Ndu was asking.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not just also about waiting once a year for the Concours elegance to come and take your car out. I mean, we have other activities throughout the year. We get together as classic car enthusiasts. We meet for an afternoon of just, car banter over a drink, coffee or a beer or something, take out our cars, admire them, just talk a little bit about them. Sometimes we do long drives. We drive to Nanyuki, we drive to Naivasha, we drive to Western Kenya in these classic cars, Yeah. So there's a lot that we do with these cars.
Do you now also, have you found over the last 50 years, in which you combine? So there is the love for vintage cars, and as you're meeting, you're also indulging in other vintages. Let's say this particular event is all about bringing our classic cars to this place where we've got vintage collection of wines and whiskey, and has it grown into that? Or we are going into this old place, this old home, it's 1930 estate, and this house has been renovated and rehabilitated by so
In
on.
the
so
times.
yeah, and we visited the house.
No, you're quite spot on. I mean, yeah, the interest is evolved beyond just cars. It's taken over other interests as well. Like you say, we talk or indulge in fine vintage drinks as well, as an example. Yeah. But then also there's a collection of other memorabilia, from back in time. So some of our enthusiasts will find them collecting coins or collecting stamps or pieces of equipment like old gramophones, record players, and stuff like that. Somebody I know, whom I'll not mention, recently acquired some very interesting and old sewing machine as part of his collection.
Operated by hand,
Yes,
I can
indeed.
imagine.
Yes.
Yeah.
This is interesting, because then it also looks as though it then is preserved for a certain age group. But I would see that younger people also would be interested in this as well. And I'm going beyond Sunday the 25th, and even before that, is there space for them as well to see, to be part of, this, experience, even at a younger age?
Exactly. I mean, most people tend to think that because it's a process, to get maybe classic car going, maybe it's not your daily run. If you own a classic car, it's not your daily runner. So most people tend to imagine that it's a spare car. So for one to be able to have the resources to keep that, you must be somehow maybe a bit advanced in life and all that. But that's not entirely true. We have a big crop of young lads who have taken a big interest in vintage and classic cars. In fact, the classic car movement in this country is growing at an amazing rate, and it's mostly composed of very young people. We've got young lads in their 20s who are collecting cars. On Sunday, the 25th of September, we'll have quite a number of young entrants showcasing their machines. I can straight away think of probably about 4 or 5 entrants who are under 30.
Right.
Under 30 years old. Yeah, so we've got a big crop of young enthusiasts joining this, taking an interest in this fad.
Now you yourself, you as Peter Wanday, you, wewe mwenyewe. How long have you been a member of this club?
I haven't been a member of the Alfa Romeo Owners Club that long, maybe 10, 15 years or so. Because remember, one of the criteria is to own an Alfa Romeo.
Yeah.
I grew up with a strong love for Alfa Romeos. I think the Alfa Romeo bug hit me when I was 13 years old. Don't ask me when I became a car enthusiast. But my love for cars and machines generally goes back to when I was even in my preteen days. So I developed a strong interest in Alfa Romeos when I was about 13 years old. And by the time I was of age to own a car, I really wanted to buy an Alfa Romeo. But it wasn't very easy. There were very few around. The guys who had them were not ready to part with them.
Holding on to them.
Holding on to them. And occasionally then you'd come across one, but it was a rust bucket, and I wasn't ready to, neither did I have the resources to resuscitate such a rust bucket. So it took me a bit of time to get an Alfa Romeo. But I kept tabs with the club. So I was, in a way, a big supporter of the club, associated with the club quite a bit. So the moment I grabbed one Alfa Romeo, I think the following day I joined the club.
You never looked back.
I never looked back. And within a short time I joined the committee, and the rest is history.
It's called manifest. From the age of 13,
I know.
I'm going to own an Alfa Romeo, right?
One day.
One day. And that day came. And now he is the chairman of the Alfa Romeo Owners Club. Are there people who currently are members of the club or even owners of the Alfa Romeo or participants, regular participants in the Concours d'Elegance, who picked it up from their parents over the years?
Yes, we've got quite a number of those. We are seeing a generational kind of transition now. So we are seeing a lot of some of the older enthusiasts handing over to their children, and some are deceased now, and the children have taken a big interest and have continued with the passion. So yes, it's happening. My own kids are all petrol heads in their own right, and 2 of my children will be participating on Sunday. I have a daughter who participated at the Concours, who entered the Concours at the tender age of 17. She entered a motorcycle, no less, at the age of 17. This year I have a son entering a 1956 motorcycle, and he's also entering a 50-year-old car. And one of my daughters is entering a 42-year-old car.
Wow.
Let's talk about this entering thing. What does that mean? So you're entering a car?
As a competitor.
Not literally getting in the car.
For to what end? Why bring your car to this event? And then then you'll tell us about this particular event, the Sunday event, how many entrants we have, how many entries we have, how many cars, how many motorcycles.
Yeah, so why enter the event? I mean, if you are a classic car enthusiast and you're a collector and you've got some cars, this event accords you the opportunity once in a year to take it out to this big show. By the way, this is one of the biggest Concours d'Elegance events around the world. There are a number of Concours d'Elegance events around the world, and this is one of the biggest. Certainly the biggest in Africa. So it gives you an opportunity to that one day get out there and showcase your car and mingle with other car enthusiasts, see what they have. And it also challenges you. It challenges you in a way that you see what other competitors have been able to do with their machines. And you want to improve your standards of your machine as well. Because if you just keep this car at home and just drive it around, you'll probably not realize that the game is changing. So
People
you want
are
to up
upping
your
their
game.
game.
Yeah, so that's really why you should get out there as a competitor and bring your car. In terms of entries, the event is open to 70 cars and 40 motorcycles. And we cap the numbers because the judging process is very intense and rigorous. And it's a one-day event. I mean, if you make the entry list open-ended, you could be there judging for 2 days straight, you know. So to ensure high quality standard of judging, we cap the number of entries. Judging starts from 10 o'clock in the morning, and the last car leaves the judging line roughly around 3:30 in the afternoon. And it's non-stop. I mean, there's no break. It's non-stop judging throughout. So out of the 70 vintage and classic cars and the 40 vintage and classic motorcycles, we also allow a reserve list of 10%. So the maximum we would take for cars is 77. That is 70 plus a 10% reserve. And for motorcycles, it's 40 plus 4. That is because on the days some car might fail to start and it doesn't show up and all that. Yeah. So this year we actually have a full house. We have we closed the entries on Friday last week, and we have 71 cars and 44 motorcycles. So it's really a full house. Yeah.
What does judging entail?
The judging entails looking at various aspects of the car. So for the cars, for example, there are 5 judging stations. The first judging station is the underside of the car. And our Concours is quite unique compared to many other Concours events around the world, in the sense that most events I know of around the world, including the largest Concours in the world, Pebble Beach, California, they do not really inspect the underside of the car. The cars are just parked there, and all the judges will do is try and bend a little bit and take a sneak peek at the bottom of the car. But ours, the car goes over a ramp, full-size ramp, and the judge walks underneath the car. This is a Quartz Oil's sponsored ramp. It's quite an attraction at the event. And so that's the first judging point, the underside of the car, where the judges look at the condition of the underside, you know, the condition of the exhaust, whether there are any oil leaks, whether there are any water leaks, the condition of the suspensions from underneath. Then the car drives down the ramp to the second judging point. And again, another unique point about our Concours is that it is a mobile judging line. A number of Concours events around the world are static.
Car is
Cars
parked.
the judges
Judge
walk
comes.
around to each car. But ours, the cars drive to each judging point. So it's a
Right.
mobile judging line. So the second judging line, the judges look at the condition of the exterior of the car. So basically the paintwork, if there are any dents, condition of the chrome work, you know, the shiny stuff, the condition of the lights, not in terms of functionality, but condition of the glass and all that. Then the next judging point, the third judging point, is the interior condition of the car. So they look at the upholstery, the condition of the dashboard, the mats, the boot as well.
Wow.
And then the fourth one is engine bay, where the judges look at the condition of the engine bay. You know, just the cleanliness of the engine bay, the how intact it is, the condition of the wiring looms, again, if there are any visible leaks and all that. Then the fifth and last judging point is roadworthiness, where the judges look at the roadworthiness condition of the car. Basically, does your horn work? Do your lights work? You know, stuff like that. Do your wipers work? And for any stuff that does not work, there are penalty points that are taken away. Now, like I mentioned, it's a mobile judging process. So if the car fails to start, for example, and has to be pushed from one point to another,
Docked
then
points.
there's a penalty of 10 points that is deducted. So those are the 5 judging points. But there's another one, a sixth one, which is not strictly related to the car and is optional, and that is a costume judging. So participants are free to dress up in a costume of their choice, perhaps linked to the theme of the event or linked to the theme of the sponsors. And it's a fancy dress competition, so to speak. So we
Actually,
have
now,
costumes.
as we mentioned the costume,
Yes.
as we conclude the conversation in about 30 seconds, what is the theme for this year? So how should we dress?
Right. This year, as you know, we are celebrating the 50th anniversary of the Concours. So it's our Golden Jubilee. So the theme is gold. It's simply gold. So we are expecting spectators,
have gold
ladies
somewhere.
and gents and children to come out dressed with something with a dash of gold.
Right.
Nice.
Kwisha.
And gold is actually the color for Jubilee, golden Jubilee.
That's it. That's right. Yeah.
Okay. See?
Mingiana,
Nice.
we are there. This Sunday, Peter, we are coming.
Asante.
Peter Wanday is the chairman of the Alfa Romeo Owners Club. He's been here talking to us about the 50th Africa Concours d'Elegance taking place this Sunday at the race course. It's gold, come with a touch of gold.